Hey, g'day YouTubers, Spanner Man again here with another video, a bit of an update on the USG grinder. I made these little side markings here, you can see them here. So this is 30 degrees, this is 35 degrees, and this is your 40 degrees. And we put this mechanism on here, we'll just see whether you can see that mechanism. So what we did was remove the normal nut that was on here and make up this mechanism so that it's much easier to tilt the head. So it's just a matter of lifting the arm up, rotating to the desired position. In my case, 40 degrees is here and 35 degrees is in the middle, and then you just lock it down and works perfect. It should have been made like that, but I guess it's all about cost. So that part of it really works well now. Now, the reason that I put markings here is that if you go to the other side, and just see if we can turn this around a bit, is that it's on the worst side. It's on the side that they've got it. You've got to tilt your head all the way down and look underneath. So you've got to look under here. When you've got all the room in the world was on this side. So why on earth you would put the scale on the side that's tilted? Because it goes from minus 15 to positive 50. So even your worst case scenario, if you were to tilt this at minus 15, and let's do that. That's minus 15 at the moment. You still can see much better this side at minus 15. You've got all this room that you can see so clearly. And if you were to tilt it to 50, we'll just go to 50. That's plus 50 there. Look how much room that you can see. You nearly got 180 degrees. So why on earth they decided to do it that way is beyond me. So I like 35 degrees as my top plate cutting angle, and that's what I normally set it at. So this mechanism is much better than using a spanner. Admittedly, I won't be adjusting this very much, but if I have to adjust it, I won't be running around looking for a spanner to fit it. 17mm ring spanner will fit the standard one on it. The other modification that I did was people report that, we'll just zoom in there, people report that this nut that pushed against the aluminium frame here, in time with a bit of constant use, the steel rubs against the aluminium as you turn the adjusting knob and can cause severe wear in there. So all as I did was take a domed nut and ground it down a little bit and just screwed that on, and I've got a little bit of stainless steel here, plate, about 1.5 millimeters, and I just siliconed it on. So both those two items are replaceable, but I doubt in my lifetime whether I would ever wear it out. The only other thing that I did make that I do use quite regularly, and I find it quite useful, is that I made this square block, which is 7.5 millimeters thick. And when placed on top here, you can set the depth that the grinding wheel comes down. So it's a good starting rather than guessing, because if I use this all the time, then I find out I don't have to clean my gullets out because they're preset all the time. And as I mentioned maybe in one of the other videos, the only other thing that I've been using, but I really dislike it, and I really wondered about the engineer in Germany as to why you would put your cable here. I could tolerate if this switch was at the front and the cable was at the back, but the switch would have been much better at the front. And the other thing is, in 9 times out of 10, the cable is going to go behind the machine anyway. So it would have been better even putting the cable to come out the back, and the cable could have came out of the back and went down. Look, I've worked with these mechanical engineers and electrical engineers at the university, and some of them aren't the sharpest knives in the drawer, so it makes you wonder. Yet there's other parts on the machine that are absolutely brilliant, like the eyeball type sockets. This is sort of like an eyeball type socket where you have a ball and a socket and you tighten up the bolt and you eliminate all side plate completely. You've got one either side, one this side, and you've got one that side. So overall, I've been using the Stihl USG grinder. Probably the most thing that I like about it, I really do like the graduations on the plate. Now, oddly enough, 30 degrees is probably the most common setting that most people will use. And you would have thought on the graduation scale, because on every chainsaw grinder that I've ever seen, a lot of them, you'll find out that they'll go 10, 20, 30, 40, or sorry, 10, 20, 30, and then 35. But here they highlight the odd number. So they highlight 15 or 10, 15, 25, 35, 45, and it's 55 here. So if 30 degrees is the most common one that's used, rather than use just a little indent, why didn't they choose to do it the other way around? That's the only thing that sort of makes me scratch my head a little bit. I know 25 degrees, a lot of people use 25 degrees, and I know, some people can use 35 degrees, but 30 degrees would be the most common top plate cutting angle. And as mentioned before, this mechanism here is very, very good. The only thing that you've got to be careful of is that if you do wear your teeth down to the witness mark and your teeth become virtually like little triangles, the grinding wheel can come very, very close to this backstop, and you can even damage it using the grinder. So be aware that it is used for the left and right tooth. So obviously when it's pushed in, the teeth that are closest to this side, which is, if you review them from the back, it's the left teeth. And these teeth are, well, hang on, we'll just check that again. You see, the other thing you've got to remember that can confuse you, everything on the Stihl's backwards. The head cutting angle tilts to the left, whereas on the Oregon it tilts to the right. So I've got to just remember that, which way is left and right. So if we view the chain at the back, these ones, this is the back, so this is the right, and that's the left cutters. So this backstop is pushed in for the right cutters and pushed out for the left cutters. See, on a Oregon, it's the opposite. You still view it from the back, but if you view this from the back, if this is the left-hand tooth here, and we turn this around, it still becomes the left-hand tooth viewed from this side. Yeah, so it's the same. And that's what probably can confuse a lot of people, is it's the opposite arrangement. And when you've been using an Oregon type style grinder for quite a while, sometimes you think an Oregon style and you get confused with this one, and vice versa. So for those people who are thinking of getting one, highly recommend them. They're a great grinder. Just remember that all these angles here are exactly the same, so there's no difference whatsoever. The only reason that this goes up to 60 degrees on the left and 60 degrees on the right, 60 degrees left and 60 degrees right, is because it's a USG grinder, universal sharpening grinder. And therefore these are used, they used to make a square jig attachment for these. So that would have been 5 different things it can do. It can do weed whackers, It can sharpen chains. It does hedge trimmers, circular saws, a little attachment. So you need to take this attachment out and you put another attachment in. You can do circular saws as well as a long bar that fits here for the hedge trimmers. And you used to get a square jig arrangement for it. I believe that they discontinued the square jig arrangement because very, very tedious grinding the wheel up at specific angles and constantly dressing the wheel. And you probably find out, look, I don't know how they do them at the factory. I'm not too sure on whether they're using a specially designed wheel for that, a CBN wheel, I would imagine. CBN wheels don't require virtually no dressing up, so, or whether it's some other high precision carbide type cutter, especially for square grind. But you can't get it anymore. So overall, these are a brilliant grinder. They're very high quality. You just got to remember that on the head, the tilting angles are reverse. So as you can see, that is a 35-degree angle, whereas on a Oregon type grinder, it'd tilt to the right hand side, and that would be 55 degrees. So if we tilt this 30 degrees, the Oregon will be 60 degrees. So it's just in reverse. So if you get a pen and paper, you could just do something like that, Stihl and Oregon. And as you can see down the bottom, 0 degrees for the Stihl. That's your vertical reference point. So at 0, this USG grinder is at vertical, whereas the Oregon at 90 degrees is vertical. And that's where it becomes all different. And a lot of people get confused with angles. Because when they first got the Stihl, they would have probably turned around. Stihl recommends on the USG chart, you'll see a lot of reference to 40 degrees. And over here on the Oregon, it's 50. Now, what happens, I've heard people say it before, they'll say, oh, my Stihl USG only goes to 50 degrees. It doesn't go to 60. And I guess what happens, Stihl doesn't tell anyone, oh, by the way, this is a little bit different than the other type grinders, or vice versa. There's no reference in the Stihl manual about Oregon grinders and reference or cross-reference. It would have been good if they'd put something in there that, you know, because people have brought these and gone out and scratched their head and thought, oh, well, I'll just stick with what the manufacturer tell them, but they don't fully understand the angles. These angles here are fine, as well as the Vise. Now, the Vise angles are huge because of the other functions that the USG can do. And as you can see, you've got minus 40 there to positive 40. And that's achieved just by undoing this wing nut underneath here and moving this plate. So, as you can see, it works quite well all the way out to 40. And this would be for the different attachments that fit to it. I don't know. I've never used it. I'll probably never will use it. I'll only use it for chainsaws. So I'm not too sure where you use up to 40 degrees. But on a full chisel chain, still don't recommend the 10 degrees downward tilt. They don't see much advantage to it anymore since probably 1990s. Whereas other manufacturers recommend 10 degrees tilt. Now, if you were going to use 10 degrees tilt, if you're doing, remember we said we view the teeth, so we'll view the teeth from the back as what you're supposed to. So if we were going to do 10 degrees tilt on, just remember this, that where the tooth is, so if this is an outside tooth, you pull the vise away. If you're going to do an inside tooth, then you push the vise away. So the vise moves away from the tooth, which is like tilting the vise. Because when you have an Oregon type grinder, you tilt the vise that way or you tilt the vise that way, which moves the tooth further away from the grinding wheel. And that's what you do on here. So if you want to do this tooth here, you move the vise 10 degrees that way, and you want to do the inside tooth, you push it that way. Where a lot of people get confused is there's a little jingle going out there. It says on an Oregon type grinder, right away, meaning that you push the lever that's underneath. On an Oregon, you have a tilting vise that tilts like this. So what they turn around and say, oh yeah, push the lever, push it away from you. But when you push the lever away, it tilts the vise over. So, and that's where people get confused. They think, oh no, you've got to push a sliding vise that way for the outside tooth. No, you do it that way. It's the same effect. Tilts over when you push the lever, because the lever is fixed, say, roughly in the middle position, and when you push the bolt, it tilts like that, or tilts that way. 10 degrees that way, 10 degrees that way. So don't get confused with that. A lot of people have, even myself, got confused at one stage about that, but once you've made the mistake, you'll never do it again. Look, there's probably not much else I can say about this. I've given it plenty of reviews. I've given it my criticisms. I've given it my praise. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I am an end user, and I do like high-end quality products, and I do expect a lot out of the equipment that I've got, and I expect it to function exceptionally well, especially this grinder. I expect this to perform very good. You will notice on some of the Oregon grinders and the Tecumseh, lately they come out with a hydraulic assist clamping mechanism on here. I prefer to avoid those like the plague, because while they do work good, I'm not saying that they don't work good. What I am saying is that they're prone to leakage. So that's something I would prefer not to have. Worst case scenario would be that you get one of those Tecumsehs, you only had it for 6 months to a year, and the cylinder starts leaking oil, which is what I've seen in some of the reports. In that situation, it's too difficult to convert it back to the cam lock. So this cam locking mechanism is very, very simple. It doesn't bother me to use it whatsoever, because I figure that you've got to move the chain anyway. So if we're grinding the chain, you've got to move it to the next link, whichever way that you do it. You normally use two hands, and it's just a matter of doing that. And when you're going to adjust to the next one, it's just a matter of undoing that and pulling it forwards. So it really doesn't take that much. Just get that block out of the way. It really doesn't take that much effort to do that. So, you've got to move that forwards, pull it back, takes half a second to lock it in position, pull the grinder down, grind it, then onto the next one. So, yeah, the action of moving this lever is really simple. I do have another grinder that has a push bike brake. There's a push bike brake on top of the handle. So when you pull the handle down, you squeeze the push bike brake, or the push bike brake type handle, and the cable goes in here with a spring on it, and it closes the jaws. And it actually works quite well. But really, even if they sold a kit, they do sell a foot pedal for this. There's an accessory where you have a foot pedal, and it has the cable on here. So this is just, you just undo this, wind it off, and put the other. The installation takes about 30 seconds, and you use a foot pedal. But what I've heard from a lot of people is that the foot pedal moves around, needs to be anchored on the ground. So for all the trouble and effort, look, if you were using one of these grinders in the shop, maybe you might do something like that. But for the home user, wouldn't even worry about it. You're only going to be doing a few chains. Even if you've done a few chains a day, that's nothing. It's not worth going all the trouble and effort for some foot pedal when you're only doing a couple of chains. Anyway, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up. Bye for now.